For our final plenary, the title is the theme of our conference, Youth Power Up for Stigma-Free Future. Please welcome our moderator, Daniel Driffin, who serves as the co-chair of the Fulton County Task Force on HIV/AIDS and is the Director of External Affairs of Thrive Support Services, a patient advocacy and social support network based in Atlanta, offering resources for Black, gay, bisexual, and same-gender loving men living with HIV to achieve a better health equity. Please welcome Daniel Driffin. Awesome. All my stuff.
Oh no, it's totally okay. Hey family, how y'all doing? Come on now, come on now. I know we've been here a nice little minute. However, it's Friday, right? We're 6 days or so away from Thanksgiving, which means like after next Monday, all work will stop, right? And there's only holiday parties from here on out. No? Okay, all right. Well, maybe that's in my head. So it gives me great honor to share this space with you all. Again, my name is Daniel Driffin, and I had the opportunity to create a non-traditional organization called Thrive Support Services. Thrive stands for Transforming HIV Resentment into Victory Everlasting. Let me say it one more time. Transforming HIV resentment into victory everlasting. So in our name itself, we are HIV acceptance, HIV love, anti-stigma, all in one. Our organization started back in December 2015 when 3 other Black gay men living with HIV came together to impact what we were seeing on a day-to-day basis. That day-to-day basis looked like young Black gay men learning their HIV status and not actively getting into care. It also looked like individuals not having a way to communicate through social support and all of those types of things. So we put our heads together and we created a non-traditional online support system. From the online support system, we found a building. We brought together more than 1,000 Black gay men living with HIV in Atlanta, and also more than 250 women living with HIV. So you are already doing my job, and I accept it and I appreciate it. Everyone else, if you have your phone, take it out for me. Go to menti.com. That's MENTI.com, and you can see it at the top of the screen. Okay? Within this panel, we wanted to bring everyone in the audience actually to that extra last seat down there. That's your seat, okay? And we are doing this through menti.com. Once you get to Menti, type in the number 23606. Once again, that's 23606. I'll let you do that. Once you get there, you should see a question, and that question is one word when you think about stigma. While you answer that question, I'm going to take a moment and introduce the esteemed panelists. So first up, we have Richard Hutchison. Richard, wave to us. Hutchison, wave your hand, wave your hand, okay. Richard, and all of the bios are actually included in the booklet, so I'm going to save us time so we can just dive right in. Next up, we have Ms. Tranisha. I can never do it. Wave, Tranisha. Next up, we have Miss Mikey Lamb. Thank you. We have Gregory Green. Thank you. And we have another Richard Atkins. Wave your hand for us. Wave your hand. Wave your hand. Thank you. All right. So, again, this is going to be a really, really interactive session through the use of Menti and also through the use of our panelists. So first up, panelists, when you think of the word stigma, what is your personal definition of stigma? And I'll have everyone go through this question and then we'll branch off, okay? So who wants to go first for me? Yeah.
that we project onto people, and then those people or persons are then carrying the burden of that.
Thank you for that. Come on down the line. Whoever is next.
Hello, hello. Does this kind of work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. Similar to that, just refers to prejudice, negative attitudes, and abuse directed to an individual or a group of folks.
For me, stigma is just reinforced ignorance, depending on where you're getting your information from, depending on what you see. And I know in today's society, you can, especially because it's so opinion-based nowadays, you can find anything to support your ignorance. And with that stigma being so reinforced and so on the front line because of social media and things of that nature, it's one of those things where it's like, now you're just choosing to. We good? So that's how I feel. That's my personal definition of stigma. Absolutely.
When I think of stigma, I think about not only fear and shame that people try to project onto others, but that fear and shame that we have within ourselves. Many times we may feel the same way. Thank you. Many times we may feel that same way until we are then put into a different position in life, and now we have to teach other people not to stigmatize us. We have to teach ourselves not to stigmatize ourselves.
So for me, HIV is a virus. Stigma is the deadly disease. That it's not the HIV that prevents people from accessing care. It's stigma, whether through exclusion, discrimination, or fear that they'll be treated differently. Stigma is what ultimately we need to combat to end the AIDS epidemic.
Thank you. Thank you. So your panelists, that's not in the seat, really attack many of the same words that you have already stated: ignorance, judgmental, uneducated, fear, shame, everywhere problematic, ostracized, shun, misconceptions. I'm thinking our next question, you can go to the next question. And that next question will prepare us. You should just be able to push the arrow button on the screen. Bam. Thinking about ways stigma have affected you in your personal life, can you maybe three of our panelists give us a snippet of different ways stigma has impacted your lives, either as personally or even in your professional roles?
I'll start. Is that okay?
Come on.
So, I am HIV negative, and I take PrEP. And how that has affected me, I'm married to a female, but I am also transgender. So, I know the group earlier was talking about intersections. I mean, there's a handful for you right there. There's been so much stigma behind the idea that someone married who presents a heterosexual relationship is taking PrEP. And my reality is my wife and I have somewhat of an open relationship. And we're very real about what we like and who we like, and how to make sure that we both remain STD and HIV free as best as possible. So the stigma behind PrEP, I feel, is so often pushed as a gay male or a medication for the LGBT community, when in fact it's not. So I try to use, whenever I speak, I try to use that to let people know. If you know what you're doing, like, don't act like you're not doing things. Let's talk about safe sex and good sex conversations. How you can keep doing what you're doing without having to add any additional medications to your daily routine.
Thank you. Thank you. Come on, Richard.
Sure. So I've been living with HIV for 28 years. I was diagnosed in 1996. That I acquired the virus from my mother. And so I want to use this opportunity to highlight some of the struggles of people born with HIV, which is often you don't hear about. So one of the things that for those born with HIV, that they often carry the trauma of parents that may be in a form of losing them. It may be in a form of ending up in foster care. It may be, in my case, the form of having a parent that struggles with substance abuse and ultimately incarceration. So being a young adolescent is hard enough. Dealing with any of those things is even harder. And when you combine that, dealing with HIV and the stigma that's associated with it, it can be troubling. And I am also a heterosexual male. So when I attend stigma conferences and US conferences and international ones, often the heterosexual community is left out, which I understand that we're not a key population of people who are impacted by the virus, but we do account for approximately 24% of new infections as of 2017, and it's almost rarely that you ever hear the voice of that community, which throughout this conference you hear topics of inclusion and being heard. And when I was preparing for this conference, I questioned how much my voice matters. Do I deserve to be up here? Because people like me don't carry the burden of the fight against HIV. Yeah.
I guess I'll follow my fellow Richard. For me, personally, stigma, I am a person living with HIV. I'm 5 years now. But before I became a person living with HIV, and before I started doing work in HIV, stigma showed up in a way that I never knew how to identify beforehand, right? So when I was in college, at one time I found out that 4 of my other fellow young gay black men all were living with HIV. But they hadn't told me, and we had been friends for years. And for me, at that time, I recognized just how real stigma was, right? Because they felt the fear and the shame associated with living with HIV, so much so that they couldn't even tell me as a friend, which really built the trajectory that I'm on now. Like, the work in which I do is based in, like, debunking that very stigma. Fast forward, then I became a person living with HIV, but also I'm a professional and I work in HIV prevention and I'm building community. And we oftentimes don't talk about that stigma because I should know better. I should have known better. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't be a person living with HIV right now because I teach the community. I have the education. I know the statistics. I know all of that. And that stigma in itself put me in a mental health state in which I was just pushing myself through because I had to be a leader and I had to show up and I had to continue, but I really didn't give myself the space to, like, deal with the trauma of becoming a person living with HIV. I felt like I had to keep going because, one, I don't want to live in the shame of I should have known better, so now I got to compensate by continuing to do work in uplifting community and educating people. But that stigma left me in a state of depression that I hadn't realized at the time. So that stigma is real. And then to echo the idea of intersectionality, I think that we have to look at it, stigma comes in layers. So yes, I deal with the stigma of living as a person living with HIV, but I also deal with the stigma as being a young person, a young professional. I deal with the stigma of being a black man. I deal with the stigma of being a gay man, and both of those things at the same time we know comes with hella layers of stigma, which often, exacerbates our vulnerability for health disparities like HIV. So the stigma is layered. And oftentimes we have to look at it not from just a one lens. We can't just look at people as people living with HIV. They are persons, and that person is made up of intersections, and that comes with stigmas in those intersections as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. Trinish, you want to answer this?
I mean, hello. A lot of it's just echoing at this point. Intersectionality is big. A big thing, or just to bring up again, for me, what was really heavy was the internalized stigma, and that's not often in the forefront of these stigma conversations we have. That generally, that is how people are operating, how they live in the world, is the internalized shame and stigma, and the messages that we see. And of course, the intersectional identities that we live with, all of those things impact us differently, and they're also impacting us at the same time. And so it's heavy, yeah.
Mikey.
Stigma, for me, stigma actually led me to my HIV diagnosis in 2012. I was definitely one of those girls that used to use the health reads, one of those, make sure y'all got your T cells because it's cold outside. I was one of those people that would be in the forefront of that stigma, and when it came time to get tested, I would put my negative results up and showboat and all those things, and I didn't have that same energy when I was diagnosed with HIV, and I was like, wow, Mikey, you're now one of those people. And back to the intersectionality, me being an open white queer man in the South, stigma's not the same for anybody that doesn't look like me, and those are the most vulnerable to this virus. So with stigma affecting me, still, facing, being turned away from a haircut, turned away from a photo shoot, turned away from a makeup artist, I still walked away with that privilege knowing like, okay, well, that's gonna happen, but not knowing in some instances of people who don't look like me, that could ultimately end up in death, somebody being outed, and religious reasons and other community reasons. So stigma definitely affects me to the point of knowing it's greater than myself, and there's a lot more reasons to fight this than just me.
Excellent, thank you. So if you guys, if you all are not aware, all of the panelists actually are touching multiple pieces of stigma in their day-to-day work, like literally even while they're sleeping. Recently, Mikey actually published two or three articles, two articles specifically talking about the disservice providers associated with care. And I definitely think those pieces and pieces like that go towards dismantling stigma, shame, fear associated with HIV. Can you talk to those articles, and then we'll pivot into the work that you all are doing currently on how it's dismantling stigma?
My first article with The Body, it was just basically telling my story, being diagnosed with HIV, and the work I do within the HIV community, also for racial inequality, just around the world and also within the HIV community, because me being diagnosed with HIV 6 years in, we talk about access, we talk about inclusion, we talk about representation, and I saw none of that. And the reason why I decided to have a voice, because within 6 years, I lost 3 friends, 2 years apart from each death, and all of them were Black boys. And I was like, how the hell I'm living and I'm thriving, but this is continuing to happen to my friends. And actually my ex-boyfriend passed away the July before that. And it was like, I loved you, I cared about you, and you died in the hospital alone, and nobody knew about that. How and why am I living? So we have some things to address, and Danny will let you know, if there's no room at the table, I'll either get up or start standing on it, and then we'll go from there. And my second article, I moved from Florida. I'm a native of Florida, and I moved to Atlanta. And Atlanta, the healthcare there for people who are on Ryan White or ADAP or anything of that assistance, spectrum, it's just so hard. They'll treat you like, okay, whatever, we'll get to you, grab a number, and going just misinformation, miscommunications between agencies that are life-threatening. If it didn't have, the privilege that I can walk around with, the health literacy that I have, and just the knowledge from working directly in this field and living with HIV, I would have been another, sad casualty, unfortunately, and they just would have said, okay, next, we can just, get rid of his file. And I decided to speak up against that because ain't no telling with me and everything that I walk around with what's going on to my counterparts that are there, that have been going through this, that have given up, that decided to stay off their meds, that decided to, not go to their doctor's appointments. And what Thrive does, which is so beautiful, is actually goes into these trenches and meets these black queer men and pulls them out. And not even pulls them out because it's not a pull or a push, it's a walk with you. And then going to what Richard does with He Is Valuable, it's a safe space. Hey, come here. We ain't going nowhere. This is what we're gonna do. And we're gonna sit here, we're gonna talk about it in our wholeness, in our blackness, in our queerness, and the intersections that, do that. So it's just beautiful to see. And not a lot of people know about the Thrives and the He Is Valuable, so why not, center, empower, and uplift those folks?
Thank you. So, what else are you doing in your day-to-day work to dismantle stigma? And Mr. Presenter, you can go to the next question. See, that's where you guys, our last panelists, come into it, okay? So you guys take a moment to answer the question, and we'll listen to the panelists. Go ahead.
Start here. Well, first and foremost, I think there's great power in personal narrative and the ability and having the privilege to be able to share your narrative. So the first thing I always do is live in my full truth. I am a black gay man, black queer man living with HIV, and in the privilege of saying that alone begins to and continues to debunk stigma, because I recognize, much like Mikey has said, the privilege that I have to be able to even sit on the stage and say that. A lot of my brothers do not have the space or opportunity or the know-how to do so I will continue to do that. I also have the greatest honor that Mikey said. I serve as the executive director and co-founder of an organization called He Is Valuable. And the name, much like Thrive in and of itself, the name in and of itself addresses stigma head on. So HIV becomes He Is Valuable. It's an organization dedicated to identifying, reinforcing, and celebrating the value of black queer men. And when we think about stigma, and when I talked about the intersectionality that particularly myself as a young gay black man, and particularly living in the South and a person living with HIV, that layer of stigma needs to be addressed. And what we find a lot in healthcare and healthcare settings is that people are addressing behaviors and not the mind, body, and the soul. So the mission of He Is Valuable to not only ensure that black queer men have access to HIV care and treatment, but that you walking around with a purpose. You were born on this earth for a reason, and oftentimes as young gay black men, we are often told that we don't matter by the world. And we can kind of continue to try to tell ourselves, but the world, when you look on the news or the lack thereof news around our stories and our narrative, they're told on our behalf. And He Is Valuable, and much like Thrive says, we're about creating our own narratives and telling our own narratives. And we want to continue to do that by addressing HIV from an anti-stigma lens, but from a racial justice lens as well. And a lot of the healthcare work and a lot of the people that I work with are not working within a racial justice lens. And we have to begin to do that if we want to really debunk the stigma that's associated with HIV, because we know HIV is not a siloed thing, right? People come as people, as my counterparts have said, and we show up as black people, we show up as transgender, gender non-conforming people, we show up as young people, we show up as men, and all those things come with different aspects that need to be addressed. So every day I'm always going to stand up for human first, right? If we come from a human rights perspective, then we can address the stigma, and people don't just address stigma, they walk around with purpose. When you walk around with purpose, you move different. The way you navigate your health, the way you navigate your mental health, the way you navigate your economics is going to be different. But first, we have to let people know that they matter and that they have value in the world.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Real good. Real good. Anyone else?
Go. So, since I was diagnosed, the biggest thing that I wanted was to be normal, to not have to take medicine, not to hide my diagnosis, to feel that I was, in a sense, a normal person and not less than. So how I carried myself was to be normal, and it came at a cost, that by being normal, I wasn't being me. That For my career profession, I picked something that was far away from HIV, accounting, that I still volunteered and volunteered at a summer camp. I volunteered with World AIDS Day presentation, but my goal was to stay as far away from the field of HIV as possible until when I was graduating college, I got the opportunity from an organization that I volunteered with to be a youth delegate to the International AIDS Conference of 2014 in Australia. And I was like, Australia? Shoot. All right, I'll go. That's fine. And my experience there, I learned the power of hearing stories, how that moves people, not statistics. And then I also learned that a story like mine wasn't being told. So that lit a fire under my eye, and I decided to start telling my story and watching it impact people who were closed off, who HIV doesn't affect, the church, straight community, who just turned their vision off. They listened to me. That I partnered with the Lutheran Church to create a toolkit for congregations to help in the fight against HIV. It may be using their space to open a shelter, or maybe doing World AIDS Day testing, or opening a food bank and giving donations to those in need. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So some of the things that have popped up thus far, listening, more education, truth to power, speaking to family, it's really, lifting up the active consciousness of what it will take to dismantle stigma and shame in each of our networks. And I firmly believe everyone sitting in this room and outside of these walls can and will impact stigma, but I definitely think it starts with ongoing conversations like this. I think one of the last questions, and we still have 2 microphones. So if you have any questions, comments that is rumbling in you, please join us at one of the microphones while we tackle the last question that wasn't emailed, but it's an easy one. So thinking about people first language. So when I say people first language, I mean truly and actively not using words like infected at all. Okay. Not using, not focusing on the disease, but focusing on the person. How important is language as we fight our efforts of dismantling stigma and shame? And anyone can jump on.
Language is vital when we talk about addressing stigma. Words like infected and things that focus on the disease and not the person, we just further exacerbate the effects of stigma, and we have to be accountable. And I know sometimes we lead with great intent, and some of us in this room, including myself, may continue to use that language, but we have to challenge ourselves to step beyond that. And when people of community or people impacted by something are expressing that they don't want to be considered infected or to be looked at as a disease, we have to begin to shift our culture. And part of shifting culture is adapting language that is people first, right? So language is vital to addressing stigma because that's how we interact with each other, right? If you're a doctor and I go into your office and you use words like infected, how am I supposed to trust that when you go into your communities and I'm expecting you to have conversations with people that are not me, that you're not saying things worse than that you don't consider me to be dirty or those othering people, or, oh, he's just a gay man, so he must be promiscuous. That language is not only important for that moment, but it speaks to how we carry ourselves and communicate to people outside of professional space, right? So you're a doctor and providing, or a service provider and using that type of language, I cannot trust that when you go to your communities and when you're talking to your family, that how do I not know that you're adding to the very stigma that you are putting a front to be addressing? So language is very important because it's indicative of how we show up in the world.
And just to go off of that, as a writer, poet, in the many facets of my artistry, words matter. Words carry power no matter how you talk to yourself or how you talk to people. And it's just something, like Richard said, you have to continuously challenge and evolve and put yourself in spaces where you can learn these things, and also being open to being challenged, being corrected, and really having to stand in that, like, oh, damn, I fucked up. I didn't mean to, offend anybody. But also, after that apology needs to come changed action. So with, infected, compliant. You're not compliant with your medicine. Offices have compliance officers. You will be shut down if you are out of compliance. So that's what it sounds like to me, like, oh, because I'm non-compliant, I'm gonna have somebody come to my door with a manila envelope and a clipboard and like just totally X me out. Adherence, that gives me something that I look forward to, like a reward, like, wow, I get to live a full, healthy, normal, whatever normal is in 2019, right? And just, again, being able to have that reward of life. And, myself and Richard, we're both living in Atlanta. We were actually able to do, the method that Thrive does, which is call people in. We are at a kickback. We were, hanging out, doing what we do. And somebody used, the T word that was, once accepted, now a slur when talking about our trans and non-binary brothers, sisters, and folks in and out of the spectrum. And it could have went left. It really could have, because, how we get down. But it was definitely such a teachable, loving moment. And that person, not only apologized, but didn't use it for the rest of the night. And hopefully didn't use it for, the rest of their time that they're here with us. So it's, again, moments to have challenged people and being ready to, but also when you're being challenged, to acknowledge and then have the action to move forward.
And that's exactly where I was going to go with that, is when we choose words and someone makes us aware that a word is disrespectful, or a word is causing pain or causing trauma, or just makes someone feel uncomfortable, we have to adjust ourselves. We also have the right to correct that person, give them a course correction of where they're going. Like you said, it could have gone left, but you had a correction moment. And you have the right, if that person disrespects you again or hurts you again with their words, to use your own choice of words. That's my belief. I've had people who have been disrespectful to me, and I will say, okay. I have family to this day who still says she to me. If they're in public, I laugh and I say they talk about themselves in the third person, and I make them, I make it go from there. But when you disrespect someone continuously, and then they fall away from you, you can't say, oh, you don't talk to me anymore. You don't look within and see what's happening there. And allow yourself that same thing. If someone is treating you that way, if someone is using their words in a way that's just continuing to cause you harm, you, again, use your words to let them know and create new boundaries for that person. Because it could have been someone, it could be someone that's close to you. But if they continue to disrespect you and use words that aren't going to be helpful and uplifting, then you have to then create new boundaries. And that takes time to heal from, but not as long as if you allow them continually to rip that scar.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. Yes, someone started clapping. Yes, give these angelic troublemakers a round of applause. So, wow. What do I want to say next? These folks, not me, these folks, okay, sitting down, will be the ones leading us to end HIV in the United States, okay? We have to not only continue this conversation, but find ongoing, meaningful ways that pay, let me say it again, that pay these folks, okay, to create new solutions that will get us towards zero,
Marissa stood up earlier this morning and said, without including any of us in this room, we will not get to zero. The beautiful young lady on the last video said nothing about us without us. One of the things that we always forget about that sentence that truly, was birthed out of the Denver Principles is the last couple of words. Not only the nothing about us without nothing about us without us, the last sentence says is for us. Okay? So if we're not at the table to create it, okay, to implement it, to evaluate it, throw it away. Just throw it away, okay? So again, I just wanted to say thank you to the most amazing panelists. I think we have a couple of more seconds. If anyone has any comments, questions that wasn't addressed here, we would love to open it up. I see a beautiful hand in the back. Whew. One of y'all wants it.
I'll go.
So everyone who may not have heard the question, do we ever think a time will come where there will be no word of stigma? Richard?
So when I gave the definition, I said HIV is the virus, stigma is the deadly disease, that if we cured HIV today, we would still have homophobia, transphobia, poverty, discrimination against people who inject drugs, mental illness. All those things won't go away, so it's important that we combat stigma head on, address it, speak out. When we're silent, that's what gives stigma the biggest advantage. So we have to stay active. It's possible, but it's an uphill battle that will require all of us. Yeah.
I see a question. I see someone at the microphone. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. To me, when I listen to the panel, and I'm thinking of the word stigma and stereotypes and things of that nature. And I'm gonna be real with you, because out here is real, and you all know that. You can hear it in the music, you can hear it in the tapestry of the social landscape of the environment. You can hear it in the prison system. You can hear it everywhere. It's reverberating everywhere. And one of the things that I'm checking out seriously is this is almost like bullying. I mean, you got these cats, they go on the internet, social media, somebody bullies somebody and somebody gets into a frenzy and they want to kill themselves, and you have all these type of things going on. So I kind of grew up I'm kind of like mitigating your generation and my generation and how I grew up and when people call somebody a name and how we dealt with it versus how you all deal with it. And to me, stigma is something like snitching. You know, it's something like snitching. If you're walking down the street, right, and you see a murder, and you tell somebody, oh, I saw the murder and this what happened, to me, that's not snitching, right? But if you're selling drugs and you hanging out with your homie, and this homie's hanging out, and this homie, y'all dealing with drugs, and one get caught by the police, and you telling it on everybody, to me, that's snitching. Well, stigma to me is the same thing. Like my man, he was born my man right here on the end, he was born with this. Some people have a behavior, right? They have a behavior pattern that created this, right? To me, in my being, I can't have no sympathy for a person like that. That's your behavior. You chose to do that, and that's the result of that, right? That's how I think. Now, I'm being real. Like I said, I'm being real. And I'm not the only one to think like that. I'm pretty sure. I don't know about here, but I'm talking about the world, right? And it's real. People out here think like that. I'm just being honest, right? Now, a person who's born with it, I can get with that. But I'm not sitting around here having sympathy for everybody based on your behavior, because you're an adult. You have responsibility. And if you get certain things based on your behavior, that's the end result of your behavior. That's my thing.
Can I?
It's okay. It's all right.
You
Don't,
All right.
well, don't,
So-
don't boo him.
boo him.
Don't
So
boo
watch
him.
Yeah, don't
this.
boo him. Don't boo him.
Watch this.
It's all right.
Watch this. Watch this. Okay. That's stigma.
Amen.
Okay.
Call it what you want.
No.
It is what it is. That's the way I think.
I would like to invite you, okay, to truly think of the conversation of it's centered in things that individuals cannot change, right? And those are big systems. So like housing, employment, education, income, things like that. And what we know to be true is more times than not, individuals learn their HIV status connected to one of those systems, okay? I would gift to you to truly have additional conversations with more individuals connected to any of the movements that you may have heard today in the room, because I firmly believe the comments would change. As a respect for time,
Respectfully, though, sir. Respectfully, though. Let me say this real quick.
can I actually have to
I
go
got what you're
to
saying.
this-
Those external factors. But God gave us a responsibility to be responsible for our own actions, okay? And there are certain things that we'll do and certain behaviors that we endorse create certain type
And some people
of,
indulge in those behaviors
certain
because
things.
they're homeless, because they have no money, and because
Okay,
they're being discriminated
so,
against.
but
So
I'm-
if somebody
but
has to
hold
go
on,
and
hold
pay
on,
sex,
man. Let me finish. I have a right to express myself. You all express yourself. Let me express myself. Just my point of view. So listen what I'm saying. So all I'm saying
Can we,
is
is there any way? This is gonna be our last comment on this side. Come on up.
I just want to add that it's very important that if we're talking about changing stigma and things like that, we can't just dismiss, right? We can't just dismiss the challenging rhetoric like that. We don't agree with it, but we can't change without being challenged in that way. So we don't want to completely dismiss people who have opposing views. One of the greatest things that we can do to be able to move forward is to be challenged and deal with resistance. So we don't want to dismiss that, but it speaks volumes and illustrates the work in which we have forth in addressing stigma, because there's a level of understanding that we all must get to, and we can't shun anyone away if we all must be there in order to end the epidemic.
Thank you. You're gonna close us out.
Oh, well, thank you. Hello, hello, hello. This is Deidre Speaks. I'm actually showing right now, watching my very folks on Facebook. First and foremost, gentlemen, thank you for at least sharing your views, and we appreciate those views because now we know how to handle those. But I have to be honest, I'm not my disease, I am not HIV, and I'm not my behavior. But I am a mother. I am a mother of two. I'm a mother of two that have graduated, one from Radford University, and the second is on his way and actually performing right now at Morehouse University.
the house,
Yes. He was born from my womb, and I was HIV positive. And had I not known that I was HIV positive, then he may have ended up HIV positive. But I made sure to fight every day to take my medication so that he would not be in that space. So I will say that we are not HIV. We are people, we are human, and we are here. I actually want to be here and be present to say to these young folks, thank you. Thank you for showing us what our epidemic is going to be ended and how it's going to be ended by innovative thinking, by innovative folks, bringing up truth, bringing up their light and bringing up who you are. On several of the panelists, I know you personally, and I am so, 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 so proud of you as a mom, and as a mom of a non-binary, non-gender conforming, everything else in between. I love you, and you are valuable, and so is everyone else on that panel. Young man, as a young man as a heterosexual, I'm excited to see you up there, and I hope that more older folks will get the opportunity to stand in your shoes and do that too. Because as a cisgendered woman, sometimes we're not at the space either, but we stand up for everybody because we know that love is love, and we love to love on each other. I always say on my shows at night, and I encourage folks to take their HIV medication and other medications that they may take at night, and I say love isn't love until you give it away. And sir, I hope today that you get some love from all of us that are HIV positive and HIV negative.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to leave with a quote from my favorite poet. His name is Essex Hemphill, and he transitioned as a result of complications to AIDS in the early 90s. The poem is called For My Protection, and it starts off with, I want to start an organization to save my life. If whales, snails, dogs, cats, Chrysler and Nixon can be saved, certainly the lives of Black men are priceless and worth saving. Thank you all for your time today. We look forward to ending the HIV epidemic with all of these amazing innovators on this panel, and you also. Have a great day. Thank you.